These places are not hidden. They are not restricted by law. Millions of people walk through them every year, take photos and leave without noticing anything unusual. But there are areas inside America's most famous national parks where the rules quietly change, where warnings become vague, where rangers avoid details, and where locals stop talking altogether. Nothing dramatic is announced. No official explanation is ever offered. Access remains open, at least on paper, and that contradiction is where the problem begins. Lock your doors, put your headphones on, pull your blanket tight, because after this, you will never look at America's most famous national parks the same way again. The areas of the Grand Canyon Rangers do not like to discuss. The Grand Canyon is one of the most studied landscapes in the United States. Its geology is mapped, its trails are documented, its risks are well known. At least that is how it appears publicly, but there are sections of the canyon that rangers consistently avoid talking about in detail. Not areas that are officially closed, not zones marked as dangerous, just places where explanations suddenly become short, vague, or redirected. Visitors who ask specific questions often receive the same answers. There's nothing of interest there. It's not recommended. You should stay on the main routes. What stands out is not what is said, but how quickly the conversation ends. Over the years, multiple hikers have reported being quietly discouraged from approaching certain side canyons. No formal warning, no posted reason, just a subtle shift in tone. Some locals claim that these areas have a long history of unusual reports, not dramatic incidents, patterns. There are rumors of large unidentified animal sightings deep below the rim. Descriptions are inconsistent, but the scale is always emphasized. Bigger than expected, moving in ways that do not fit known wildlife behavior. Others talk about temporary structures, metal doors embedded into rock faces, equipment that appears overnight and is gone by the next morning. No tracks, no signage, no acknowledgement. From my perspective, what is difficult to ignore is the consistency of these stories. They come from different decades, different people, often people who have never spoken to each other. I do not think this is about monsters or fantasy. I think it is about something that creates liability, if openly discussed. If nothing unusual is happening, why discourage access without explanation? Why keep areas open on paper, but avoid it in practice? Why do these reports sound the same, even years apart? One possible explanation is ongoing research. Another is unstable terrain that cannot be publicly admitted without triggering restrictions. Some believe it is related to monitoring equipment tied to deeper geological activity. None of these explanations fully account for the silence, and what makes this more unsettling is that this behavior is not isolated to the Grand Canyon, because what happens next does not happen at the bottom of a canyon. Mountains where rescue protocols quietly change without explanation. The Rocky Mountains are promoted as challenging but manageable. Visitors are told what to expect. Weather risks are explained. Rescue services are presented as reliable. But in certain sections of these mountains, something subtle changes. Climbers and hikers have reported that emergency responses follow a different rhythm depending on the location. Not slower across the board, not faster, just different. In some areas, calls are answered quickly. In others, instructions become strangely cautious. Visitors are advised to self-evacuate when that advice makes little sense. Helicopter support is described as unavailable, even in conditions where it is routinely used elsewhere. What is unsettling is that these changes are never explained. Some locals claim that certain mountain zones trigger internal protocols that are not publicly described, not because of weather, not because of difficulty, but because of what has been reported there over time. There are rumors of repeated sightings of a large, unidentified animal moving across high ridgelines. Always distant, always brief, too large to be dismissed easily, but never clear enough to document. Others describe something different. Strange lights appearing above tree lines during overnight ascents. Not aircraft, not flares. Lights that remain stationary longer than expected, then vanish without sound. From my perspective, the most concerning detail is not the sightings themselves. It is the response pattern. If these reports are meaningless, why do rescue guidelines change so consistently in the same areas? Why does assistance suddenly become conditional rather than automatic? Why are experienced climbers given advice that contradicts standard safety practice? One explanation could be environmental instability. Another could be airspace restrictions, not meant for public discussion. Some believe these areas are used for monitoring or testing equipment unrelated to recreation. But none of that explains why the same warnings are repeated year after year by different responders. And what makes this harder to ignore is that visitors are still encouraged to go there, because the next place is not dangerous because of height. It is dangerous because of what people keep noticing and cannot explain. National park zones that remain open but are treated as liabilities. Yosemite is designed to feel controlled. Clear trails, marked viewpoints, a sense that everything important has been accounted for. But there are areas inside the park that are still officially open, yet quietly treated as problems rather than destinations. Visitors describe zones where signage becomes unusually vague. Warnings mention environmental concerns without specifics. Rangers recommend avoiding certain paths, but stop short of closing them. What makes this strange is that nothing obvious appears wrong. The terrain looks stable. The visibility is good. There is no history of major incidents posted or acknowledged. And yet, something about these locations triggers a different administrative posture. Some locals claim that these areas generate an unusual number of internal reports. Not accidents, not rescues. Reports of things that do not fit existing categories. There are long-standing rumors of sudden equipment interference, cameras shutting down without explanation, radios losing signal in ways that do not match known dead zones, batteries draining faster than expected, even during short visits. Others talk about structures that do not appear on official maps, short tunnels, reinforced access points, features that seem intentional but temporary. People describe C. From my perspective, what stands out is how these areas are managed, not how they look. They are not promoted. They are not closed. They are simply handled with caution, as if acknowledging them too clearly would create responsibility. If these zones are harmless, why are they treated as liabilities? Why keep them accessible but quietly discourage engagement? Why does documentation around them feel incomplete? One explanation could be geological monitoring. Another could involve infrastructure that cannot be easily explained to the public. Some believe it is related to systems that were never meant to be noticed by visitors. But none of those explanations account for the persistent avoidance. And what makes this more troubling is that this pattern does not stay confined to one park, because the next place feels wrong even before anyone warns you. Locations where visitors report the same warnings every time. The Great Smoky Mountains are known for their visibility issues. Fog is expected. Weather shifts are normal. Visitors are told to plan for uncertainty. But there are places inside the park where the warnings stop being general and start becoming strangely specific. Hikers describe being given the same phrases, repeated word for word, by different rangers across different years. Not safety advice, not trail difficulty. Warnings about how long to stay, where not to linger, and when to turn back regardless of conditions. What is unsettling is how rehearsed these warnings feel. Some visitors report being told not to sit down in certain clearings. Others are advised to avoid stopping near tree lines where visibility suddenly drops even on clear days. No reason is offered, just the instruction. Locals claim these warnings did not always exist. They began appearing gradually, then became routine, almost procedural. There are rumors of repeated sightings of large, indistinct shapes moving through the fog. Not fast, not aggressive, just present. Descriptions vary, but the behavior does not. Always just beyond clarity. Always close enough to be noticed, never close enough to identify. Others report something more subtle. A sudden feeling of being observed that arrives without fear, then escalates without cause. No sound, no movement, just awareness. From my perspective, what stands out is not the reports themselves, but the language used by staff. The warnings are not framed as protection, they are framed as limitation. If these are natural conditions, Why are the instructions so precise? Why do different people hear the same phrasing years apart? Why does the guidance focus on behavior rather than danger? One explanation could be wildlife monitoring. Another could involve zones with known visibility distortions that create disorientation. Some believe these areas generate repeated incidents that cannot be publicly categorized, but none of that explains the uniformity of the warnings. And what makes this more disturbing is that visitors often realize something feels wrong before anyone speaks, because the next place does not rely on fog at all. It relies on silence. Trails that exist physically but are no longer actively supported. Olympic National Park is known for its diversity: mountains, rainforests, coastlines. It is also known for its trail system, carefully maintained and regularly updated, except for some trails that are not. There are paths that still exist physically. They are visible, walkable, sometimes even marked at the entrance, but once you step onto them, something changes. Visitors report that maintenance abruptly stops after a certain point. Signage disappears. Trail markers become inconsistent. Emergency reference numbers are missing or outdated. What is strange is that these trails are not officially closed. They appear on older maps. They still exist on the ground, but they no longer seem to belong to the system that surrounds them. Some hikers claim that rangers discourage these routes, using unusually indirect language, not warnings. Suggestions. This trail is no longer prioritized. It doesn't really go anywhere anymore. It's better if you turn back early. No mention of danger, no reason given. Locals say these trails are associated with repeated, unresolved incidents, not disappearances, events. People reporting sounds with no identifiable source, footsteps that follow for short distances, then stop. Voices carried through dense forest without direction. Others describe encountering temporary barriers deep along these paths. Simple gates, ropes, equipment left behind without explanation. When they return another day, nothing is there. From my perspective, what is unsettling is the administrative decision behind this. Why allow a trail to exist without supporting it? Why keep it accessible while quietly withdrawing responsibility? If these paths are unsafe, why not close them? If they are harmless, why remove infrastructure? One explanation could be budget constraints. Another could be environmental recovery efforts not meant to attract attention. Some believe these trails intersect with zones used for monitoring that cannot be publicly acknowledged. But none of that explains why these paths feel intentionally abandoned rather than naturally forgotten. And what makes this worse is that hikers often realize they should not be there only after going too far to turn back comfortably. Because the final place does not feel abandoned at all. It feels watched. Places where officials say nothing and locals say even less. Death Valley is not subtle. Its dangers are clear. Heat, distance, isolation. Visitors are warned repeatedly about what can go wrong there. But there are locations inside the park where the concern is not environmental. It is social. Certain areas trigger a noticeable shift in behavior from staff and nearby residents. Questions are deflected, conversations end early. Recommendations become unusually firm. Not about heat, not about terrain, just do not go there. Some locals claim there are zones where activity has never fully stopped. Not tourism, not research that appears on schedules, vehicle tracks that reappear despite no recorded access, lights visible at night in areas with no facilities, equipment sounds that do not match maintenance routines. There are long-standing rumors of entrances cut into rock faces. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just shapes that look wrong in daylight and impossible at night. People describe seeing them once, then never again. From my perspective, what makes Death Valley different is not the rumors. It is the silence. This is a place where danger is usually explained clearly. Yet here, explanations stop entirely. If these locations are harmless, why the hesitation? Why do officials avoid even denying the claims? Why do locals change the subject instead of dismissing the stories? One theory suggests long-term monitoring tied to environmental extremes. Another points to testing grounds that were never fully decommissioned. Some believe these areas serve a purpose that benefits from being mistaken for nothing. None of these explanations fully address the pattern, and what stays with you is not what people say about these places. It is how carefully they avoid saying anything at all. What connects all of these places is not danger in the usual sense. It is not what you can see. It is not even what people report. It is how carefully certain details are managed. These locations are not abandoned. They are not forgotten. They are adjusted, monitored, and quietly reshaped over time. Millions of people walk nearby without realizing that the rules change depending on where you stand. That some areas are treated differently, without ever being labeled as such. And once you notice that pattern, it becomes hard to ignore. If one of these places stayed with you, say which one. Not because you have an answer, but because something about it felt wrong. If you have been somewhere open, beautiful, and unsettling in a way you could not explain, share that experience. And if you want to keep exploring places that look safe, but are managed as if they are not, consider subscribing. Some landscapes are meant to be seen, others are meant to be passed by, and most people are never told the difference.